Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the EzeeLinux show. This is version 18.24, recorded May the 29th, 2018. I hope everybody in the United States that's watching this had a very pleasant Memorial Day weekend, had some fun with the family, and remembered those who served for us and gave the ultimate sacrifice. And if you are somewhere else in the world, I hope you had a nice weekend as well. In this video today, I am going to talk about kernels, specifically Ubuntu kernels, and how they are managed. We'll look at it in Ubuntu and Linux Mint, and the reason why I'm going to do this is because about once a week for the last 3 or 4 months, I have received an email from somebody who says the same thing. They say, I went to install updates and the system is telling me there's not enough room for a new kernel. It says the disk is full, but there seems to be plenty of space on the disk, and I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to explain that mystery, and I'm going to show you how to manage your kernels in Linux Mint. The mystery of that is real simple. You have a UEFI install on your system. And a UEFI install will have a small little partition at the front of the disk called an EFI partition. That's where your bootloader lives, and that's where your kernel lives, and there's some stuff that goes in there in this particular type of setup. And as you add kernels to the system, more junk gets put in there, and after a while it gets full. It doesn't show up on your regular partition on your drive, so you're thinking, I don't understand. That's what's going on. So you have to remove those kernels, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Ubuntu kernels, because they are absolutely positively the most confusing kernels in the entire Linux world. If you look at any other distribution of Linux, you are going to be dealing with maybe one or two supported kernels at any given time. Well, with the way Ubuntu is released, these are all of the currently supported versions or have been supported versions of the kernel that are out there and in the repositories right now. So whatever Ubuntu you are running could very well have any one of these kernels. And let's start at the top of the screen here where we start with 1404. And when 1404, which was a long-term support version, supported for 5 years, was released, it came out with kernel 3.13. And then we had Ubuntu 14.10 come out, and that had kernel 3.16 in it. And as we go down here, you'll see that it moves ahead incrementally until we get to the long-term support. And let's see, the long-term support kernel for 1604 is the version 4.4. And the 4.4 kernel is still being patched. The 3.13 kernel for Ubuntu 14.04, it's still getting security updates. So you could have an Ubuntu 14.04 system that you installed in 2014 when that first came out, and go look at your kernel version. It's probably 4.4. something. Probably way up in the hundreds at this point for the revision. And that's because it will be supported for the entire life of the system. Now, if this is not confusing enough for everybody who is watching this video who is new to Linux, there's another thing we got to throw in here. In the long-term support versions, the ones that are shown here, the current long-term support versions that are being supported by Canonical at this time are 1404, 1604, and 1804. Within each one of those long-term support versions, there will be point releases, which will coincide somewhat with the interim releases of Ubuntu. So, for instance, when we get to the point where Ubuntu 18.10 is released, we get close to that, there's going to be a point release that's going to backport some of the stuff into the long-term support release. And if you're running Ubuntu 1804 right now, you're going to get prompted probably to upgrade to that. You can choose not to, and you could stay with the original if it's working for you. Why is it doing that? Well, that's because that is going to give you the ability to run hardware enablement kernels. All of the hardware stuff, all of your the capabilities of your machine are handled by the kernel. So as time goes by, if you get a brand new machine And let's say you got a brand new machine coming up in around Christmas time of this year, and you want to install Ubuntu 18.04 on it. You're probably going to want to install Ubuntu 18.04.1 so you can take advantage of all of the hardware on your machine. You may have to do that. You may not have to do that. That's what they're there for. So when you hear about point releases, that usually goes along with a hardware enablement kernel, and the hardware enablement kernels are not supported for very long, usually about 9 months. And kind of goes along with the interim releases we see here. So yes, it gets very confusing. Now what I like to do with long-term support releases, and even when I was playing around with 16.04, is I like to go and get the original one that came out the first day. So when I installed Ubuntu 18.04 on this machine, for instance, I am going to hang on to that image, and if I should have to install it again later, I want to stay on this long-term support release kernel, which is running everything on my machine just fine because my machine is old junk to begin with, right? So I don't need the hardware enablement kernels, and that's what I like to try and do, is stay on these long-term support release kernels. Then I don't have to think about it at all, and I don't have to worry about upgrading to the next point release, because if you go to Ubuntu 18.04.1, you're going to have to go to Ubuntu 18.04.2 or roll back to 18.04.0. That can get really tricky in Ubuntu. So it's not just the kernel you have to deal with, it's usually the graphics stack and everything else changes from point release to point release. So I try to avoid messing with that as much as possible. But like I said, you don't have to. And in the Linux Mint world, when they come out with Linux Mint 19 coming along, nobody is forcing you when they come along to move to 18.1, 18.2, or 19.1, 19.2, 19.3. So you get the idea there. So let's take a look at managing kernels in Linux Mint. We're going to jump down here like that. And I got a virtual machine running. And in Ubuntu, it's really not that big of a deal. I will show you in Ubuntu what you need to do, but in Linux Mint, it's a little bit different. So if we open our Linux Mint installation here, I'm going to try and full screen this. Hopefully it'll work right. You'll see that we got some updates. Linux firmware. I'll install those later. So what we want to deal with is kernels. So let's say when you installed Linux Mint 18.3, you told it to upgrade everything, and you have been installing your updates as it's gone along, and so now you have a whole bunch of old kernels. How do you get rid of them? Well, you go to View here, and then you go to Linux kernels, which will take you to the Linux kernel tool, and that will open up, and you may or may not get this warning box that's just telling you got to be careful when you're playing around with kernels, gang. You can break your system real easy with kernels, or you can mess up your video drivers and stuff, so you do have to be careful, but what I'm going to show you is really safe. We're not going to talk about rolling back or anything like that. So you have a list of all the currently supported kernels, and it starts with the 4.4 kernel. That's for 16.04. This is Linux Mint 18.3, which is currently based on Ubuntu 16.04. Linux Mint 19 will be on 18.04. And these are all the kernels that are available for it now. So when you installed it, you probably had a kernel 4.8. That's still installed. And right now, the latest kernel is 4.13.43. That would go along with whatever point release of Ubuntu we're into. So this is a hardware enablement kernel. And then we have the 4.15 series, which is the one that is being shipped with Ubuntu 18.04. And they're all available here in Mint. So you can pick and choose which one is going to work best for you. I usually just go with what they want me to use unless there's a particular situation. So we only have one old kernel in here, and that's from when I spun up this virtual machine. And let's go ahead and get rid of that. So you just click on it, and then you click remove, and it asks you, are you really want to do this? And you say yes. Put your password in. Hold on. Great. Grand. Wonderful. VirtualBox is going crazy. It's not going to let me put it in there. Let's try that one more time. Hang on, folks. We'll get it straight sooner or later. That's one of the reasons you have this. It's probably mad that, probably not very happy that I'm recording video and doing this at the same time. Sometimes VirtualBox goes a little nuts when that happens. Let's see if this works this time. Let's go back to View. Let's go to Kernels. All right, let's jump in here. Yes, let's see if I've got keyboard control now. Yep, I do. So I was going into full screen mode. Sometimes when you put VirtualBox into full screen mode, it does some goofy stuff. So it does happen. All right, so what this is going to do, it's going to go and remove that old kernel. And you can just go through and take out all of the old kernels except for the one before the last one that you installed. So for instance, this is a relatively new install, and I'll show you that when it gets done here. What you really want to do is have your current running kernel, the one that you're, the one that they're on now, and you want to have the one before that. That way, if something breaks, you have something to roll back on. You really want to have at least 2 kernels installed, because if you only have one and something breaks, then you're not going to have any way out. So open this back up, and it takes a little while to load. And we'll go in here like so. So, for instance, really what would be better in this particular situation is if I had that one installed as well. But I don't, because I just redid these virtual machines not too long ago from scratch. And so, therefore, I didn't didn't have that installed. That's what I'm trying to say. Compulsively installing updates, even in the middle of a video. It says there's an update. I must install it. I must. Oh, never mind. Okay, so let's look at working with kernels in Ubuntu as Ubuntu is configured to work with kernels. Now, there are some tools out there that let you do it graphically like you do in Linux Mint. And I took a look at those before I did this video, and to install them, you have to hook up a PPA, and you have to put a deb file in there, and it also gives you access to mainline kernels, which is, they do exist in the Ubuntu repositories, but they're experimental, and I thought, well, I'm not getting into that. If you want to get into all that, if you care about kernels that much, you go ahead and you can research that, and you can just look up kernel tool in Ubuntu, and it will show up. But in Ubuntu, and we're in Ubuntu MATE here, to remove old kernels, it is really super easy. It's one command: sudo apt and then auto remove. That is all you have to do. And if there are any old kernels that are installed before the older than the last one before the one you're running, then it'll just go away. That's all you have to do. And Ubuntu automatically, when you run updates, will install a new kernel if one is available. So that's another thing to keep in mind with Ubuntu. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about kernels. There are some situations. I have a few people, we got updates on this machine too. Should I install them? Do you think I should go ahead and do it? I mean, right here in the video and everything? Yeah, let's install the updates in the virtual machines while we're making the video. Why not, right? I have this thing about, I have to really limit the number of virtual machines I have running at any given time, because I have the compulsive thing to, every time updates come in on the main system, to go update the virtual machines. I'll have 6 or 7 of them open doing it. And it's stupid. There's no reason to do it. It's a virtual machine. I only use it for demonstrations and to play with and stuff like that. But anyway, we just let it do its thing. Anyway, what I started to say about kernels was, every now and again you're going to run across a computer that for one reason or the other doesn't work on a new kernel. So you may have a kernel installed, and then an update comes in, or you go to update it and it doesn't work. And something breaks. For instance, your Wi-Fi stops working, or some peripheral or something like that. Well, that is because of the fact that there's a support problem with the new kernel, or they've dropped something or changed something. And in those instances, you have to kind of freeze the kernel. Now, that's really hard to do on Ubuntu. You have to go in, and then you have to tell apt not to update this, and you have to leave it alone. It's easier to do on Linux Mint, but with Mint, you just turn off the kernel updates, in the system, the update manager, and that's it. You're done, and that'll work fine. Now, I don't recommend that because it's insecure to just sit on one kernel forever, because that's why you're getting patches to kernels, is usually to fix vulnerabilities and problems. And one of the things that makes Linux secure is the ability to patch everything the way it does all at the same time. So if you, for some reason or the other, don't have that ability, you're freezing that kernel in place, then there's a slight chance you could be opening yourself up to a vulnerability. But you don't have to do that very often, actually, at all. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about kernels. Let's talk about mirrors now, okay? Let's talk about mirrors. This is another thing that I got asked about not too long ago, because I've done all of these videos about Ubuntu, and somebody said, hey, what about switching mirrors in Ubuntu? And I said, yeah, I need to talk about that, because I've kind of ignored that. What is a mirror? Why would you bother with this? Why do you want to know what a mirror is? Well, a mirror is a bunch of servers that have all of the repositories for whatever distribution of Linux that you happen to be running. All the main repositories, they are on different servers all around the world, and people, they donate space to a lot of Linux distributions. A lot of colleges do it in the United States. Some companies do it as well. And so when you're installing Ubuntu or Linux Mint, once you get everything all up and running and it's working the way you're supposed to, you should really check your mirrors and get a local mirror for your machine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in Ubuntu first, and then we're going to do Linux Mint, because Mint's a little bit more complicated, but it's actually a little bit easier. So here is the official Ubuntu Mirrors page, and this lists all of the mirrors around the world that are currently storing Ubuntu, and you can just come. I'm going to put this in the description for the video, and you can scroll through here and you can find a mirror that is close to you. I will also put the mirrors list for Linux Mint in the description. I have that open as well, and you can look in there, but Linux Mint gives you a little bit better control of the mirrors. So as you can see, all around the world, in different institutions and companies are offering the use of their servers to host these mirrors. Here is the Linux Mint list. They have a shorter list, of course, but it's still we have different universities in the United States. And one of the things that I did when I was preparing for this, one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is that Linux Mint sent down a new mirror list, and one of the mirrors that I use all the time and a lot of my clients use is James Madison University. And if we jump back over here to Linux Mint, you'll notice they are no longer listed under the USA mirrors. So I was like, whoa, what's going on with that, I don't know, because the James Madison University mirrors, James Madison University is in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and what's really wild is I used to actually live there. So if I was running Linux Mint at that time, which I was, I had the mirrors for Linux Mint were literally a mile and a half up the road from me, just right there. So I've kind of stuck with it, even though I don't live in that town anymore. It's still the closest set of mirrors to where I live, though. And anyway, they just dropped those mirrors. They're not on the list anymore. So I'm going, well, what are we going to do, gang? So I sent the root at Linux Mint here an email, and I asked what was the deal with that and whether those mirrors would be returning to the mirror list. Because I do have several people that are on those mirrors, but they have not errored out yet. They haven't come back and said, well, we can't reach the mirror, because Linux Mint will ask you to change to a new mirror. Anyway, backing over to Ubuntu, what I wanted to show you, importantly, and I'm just trying to scroll down to the United States here, which is taking forever to get to. There's the United Kingdom. We must be getting close. United States. When I was going through all of these different mirrors, I was looking here at the bandwidth that the different companies had available, and I noticed that this evowise.com here, they had 10 gigabits, which was nice, and it's currently saying it's 1 week behind, but anyway, if you jump over here to Linux Mint, I noticed that they are available here as well. So that is the mirrors that I'm currently running on. Doing a little experiment. The company seems to be out on the West Coast, but they have a really, really wide bandwidth, and even though they're physically not close to me, they still pop up all the time as being faster. So I'll put these pages up and you can take a look at it. And nice to know that we have updated software on this particular VM. Let's go over here to Linux Mint. And once again, we're going to look at the software sources in Linux Mint. Dare we try to full screen again? Do you think maybe we'll have the same issue? I mean, it could happen. So let's see. We want to go to Edit and go to Software Sources. It bit me again, gang. I wonder why it's doing that. I do this all the time, day in and day out, and when I'm making a video, that's when it decides it wants to go crazy. Okay. No problem. Works now. Okay. So you notice I've kind of done the same thing here on Linux Mint. I'm using that EvoWise. And if we open this up, Linux Mint, when it's searching for mirrors for Linux Mint, it does a little contest here to see which one is the fastest for you. And you'll notice that this EvoWise is coming in second so far. And it'll go through every one that it has on the list, and it'll try and get a hold of them. And I don't know anything about this mirror up here. It's advanced hosters. The only problem that I've had with that is that I'm a little leery of using it. It usually comes in the fastest for me, but I'm a little leery of using advanced hosters as a mirror because sometimes they don't work, or they haven't in the past. That may have changed now. Sometimes the mirror goes down for periods of time. So anyway, once you pick your mirror, like your fastest mirror here, let's say Clarkson, if we wanted to do that. They're up in New York State. It's not too terribly far away from me. I could pick these as well. You just click on it and then click apply, and it chooses the local mirror for you. And then we have the Ubuntu mirrors right here. And once again, I have this set up where I'm getting to the EvoWise company. I like to try and have them both on the same mirror at the same time, just so that they stay in sync with one another. And that seems to cause fewer problems with updates. So it's basically the same thing. Now you'll notice there's a lot more mirrors listed for Ubuntu in the United States. So you have to kind of scroll through here. And like I said, just look for EvoWise. Now the mirrors for James Madison University, they are still working for Ubuntu here. So what's up, Linux Mint? Why are you dropping them when Ubuntu is obviously not having any problems? I don't get it. And why haven't you answered my email? That's just not nice, man. You should be answering people's emails. Anyway, you get the idea of how this works. Once you choose your mirrors and you got them all ready to go, you probably want to update the cache. Do that before, and do this before you run updates for the first time on the machine, because the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to change your mirrors anyway. So go ahead and find some local mirrors and hook them up. And don't forget, you can change this. And a lot of times with Linux Mint, if you run into a problem where it says it can't reach the repositories for whatever reason, this is why. Just change your mirrors. Change your mirrors. I just worked with somebody the other day who said, well, I don't understand. My internet works, but I can't update my system, and I don't know what's going on. I said, well, run the mirror tool and software sources. Oh, okay, now it works, thanks. So let's look at working with mirrors in Ubuntu, and we'll show you how that works. I'm trying to recall, I don't know if I changed the mirror in here or not, so we can just do it. The reason why this Ubuntu MATE virtual machines exist is because I just set it up over the weekend for my brother, and I was working with that, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video a little bit more. So what we need is software and updates. What did I do wrong? That's what we want. All right, George, let's open this thing up. We'll take a look here. You know what? I can make this a little bigger, gang. Make it a little easier for everybody to see. Let's try scaling this up to 110% and see what happens. Yeah, that felt so good. Let's do it some more. Let's do... Yeah, okay, made it huge. Thank you. That makes it easier for people to see. Okay, those of you who are running Linux Mint, you didn't miss nothing. You can open up your own tool and you can see what the deal is. Okay, so if we come in here, you see, yes, I have changed this to the mirrors for EvoWise. They're right there. So you come down here where it says download from, and you can choose the main server. That's in the United Kingdom. We have the server for the United States. That is for, obviously, for people in the United States running Ubuntu. Duh. And then we can choose our own mirror. So we go down to Other, and that will give us the list like we just saw in Linux Mint of all the local ones, and you could choose whichever one you want. And if you notice there's JMU right there, it seems to be working just fine. Why isn't it working in Linux Mint? I want to know, Linux Mint. Let me know. Let me know. Answer my email. You're messing up my world. Do you have no clue how many people I know of that are on that mirror right now? And if it all of a sudden starts working, I'm going to get flooded with people saying, my mirror don't work no more. I don't understand. And I'm going to have to change it. So anyway, that's all you do is you just select one of those mirrors and then you click OK or apply or whatever it was. Well, like this. And then you're on that mirror. So once again, if I wanted to be on, well, I don't know, we can put it on JMU. There's not going to hurt anybody to change the mirror, is it? No. So yeah, just click that mirror, and yes, you want HTTP, and there you go. It's going to ask for a password, and you have just switched mirrors. Now, when you go to leave, it is going to want to reload on you. So I'll show you how that works. Yep. And you definitely want to reload before you close because you have switched mirrors. And you may switch mirrors and you may end up finding out that, oh my goodness, I have updates that I didn't know about. And that's because if the mirrors for some reason are behind or something like that, then you can find that happening. So, it's updating the cache. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the regular view because we're about done talking about it. Or I can leave it open. I could leave it. Well, no, actually, I want to talk about this in the next part of the video. So I'm going to leave it just the way it is. We can leave it just the way it is. All right, this computer right here is what I want to talk about. Now, what you're looking at is a picture, and it's the best one that I could find, sorry about that, of the Dell Dimension 3000 computer system. And this particular computer was sold in 2004. And this one's a real high-end unit. It's got probably a DVD drive and a CD-ROM in it there. And when these were shipped, what they came with from Dell, the base was like a 2.8 gigahertz Pentium processor, single core, of course, 32-bit. And then they usually shipped with 256 megabytes of memory. I know, that sounds crazy these days. And a 40 gigabyte IDE hard drive. Well, my brother bought one of these in 2004, brand new. Sip of coffee. And he has had that machine since 2004. It started out with Windows XP. And then, good Lord, I don't know how long ago. It's been, well, we installed Linux Lite 2 point something on it, so it would have been probably late 2014. We put that machine on Linux Lite, and at the time it had 512 megabytes of memory in it, so he had upgraded it from the original 256 at some point. But now remember, this machine was running Windows XP on it before, and I actually got it to work with 512 megabytes of memory and its 40 gigabyte hard drive and all that stuff. And so at some point, I finally convinced him to go ahead and buy some memory. So he maxed the memory out and put it up to 2 gigs. And after he did that, he could do a lot with this machine. Now, he has very limited use when it comes to computers. I mean, he does a little bit of photo management, a little bit of word processing, a whole lot of surfing the web, and a whole lot of watching YouTube videos at pretty low resolution. Because I don't know what this machine can do as far as the high. I think probably the highest video resolution could play on something like this would be 720. I think it has built-in Intel graphics, but I've never dug into it to know. I have never actually seen the machine face-to-face. My brother lives another state away, so I've never sat down in front of this machine. But I've helped him now nurse this thing along, and so he gives me a call, and he says, this Linux Lite install is way out of date, and some stuff's not working on it, and I want to try Ubuntu MATE. I've been reading about it, and I've been watching your videos about it, and I think it would be really cool. And I said, well, yeah, there's a 32-bit version of Ubuntu MATE that is available, even though 32-bit is going away quickly in Linux. And I said, let's give it a shot. So I walked him through the process of downloading the ISO and burning it onto a USB stick, and he booted the machine up off of it, and everything worked, and it was really cool. The only thing that did not work, and I don't know why, is the welcome screen and the software boutique. Now, this is not the first time that I have had this problem with Ubuntu MATE, but I've seen it in virtual machines. It's like, for some reason or other, if I install a virtual machine of Ubuntu MATE, and then I would go and install the drivers and go to open the software boutique or the welcome screen, I just get a blank screen. Well, this was happening on this computer as well, and I didn't know what was going on. And I told him, I said, well, look, I said, everything else seems to work, and so we can get around that. That's no problem. So I went ahead and walked him through installing that machine and getting all of his settings and bookmarks and stuff moved over. And he likes to use Chromium, so we installed the Chromium browser and got it all set up. And the setup that I gave him looked like this one, because what I did was, as I was walking him through it, I was doing this here. So I was installing this virtual machine. I do that sometimes with clients, especially if it's one that I don't install all the time. That way I'm looking at what they're looking at, and they're going, well, I can't find the button that says la la, and I can go, well, it's right here, and point them in the right direction. So this is what his installation looked like when we were done with it. I go ahead and get rid of that driver's disk out of there because we don't need to be there. I just removed the snaps. The snap packages that had software boutique and welcome. I'm sorry, but they just didn't work. And I installed Synaptic Package Manager, and I installed Ubuntu software, and that seemed to work just fine. I had no problem with that. That way, he's got a graphical way to look at software, and he's also got Synaptic. He's very used to using Synaptic. That's what they use in Linux Lite, and he's been using Linux Lite for a very long time. So that's very familiar for him. And then he's already been using Shotwell for his photo management, so he's happy about that. Now this machine still has the original 40 gigabyte hard drive in it. And what he does is he pretty much stores everything on little external thumb drives and stuff like that. He tries not to keep any super important data on that machine because it is a 40 gigabyte hard drive, and it was replaced just a few years ago. It's not the original one that shipped from 2004, but you never know, you know what I mean? And so I put him on this setup right here with the Redmond layout, because that would be very familiar to him, having used Windows XP. He uses some form of it's kind of funny at work where he works. He's using, like I said, I changed those mirrors, and I've got an update. But anyway, where he works, they have like a Windows 7 desktop that he logs into at his desk, right? But then the very next thing that he does is he uses SSH, I guess the program is PuTTY, I'm not really sure, to log into the main computer, the mainframe, at his company. And most of what he does he is actually doing from an Incursus terminal running on top of this Windows 7 desktop. And they actually have physical machines. They're doing it that way. So it's not like they're not virtualized or anything like that. I just find that interesting. So anyway, he's using Unix every day anyway, and he understands it. So he's more terminal based than anything else, even on his home computer. So not having all of the graphic whatevers in there doesn't bother him at all. He understands how to manage the machine and keep things up to date and all that stuff. So anyway, I worked with him, and we installed this Ubuntu MATE setup on his system. And I called him and didn't hear anything, and I called him the next day. I said, have you had any chance to work with the computer at all? And he said, well, yeah, I've been working with the computer, and everything's fine. And then I get a thing that says, well, his printer works and all that stuff. He hooked up his printer, and it's rocking and rolling down the highway. So that was a really cool experience. You hear a lot about how 32-bit support is going out the window. And I posted about this on Facebook, and some people were like, one guy was like, well, I don't understand. Just let 32-bit die. Well, you know what? There's a lot of these machines out there in the world, gang. There's a lot of folks who have these computers running. And I personally am happy that the folks with the Ubuntu MATE project made that available, because the mainline Ubuntu doesn't have that anymore. It's 64-bit. And these old machines have life left in them. As long as they have been well maintained, like my brother's machine, and they don't have any major issues with them, they can run for a long, long time. So I'm very happy that they did have that support there. Now, I realize that 32-bit is going away and from the Linux world, and people don't want to deal with maintaining two architectures and all that stuff. But the more this subject comes up, the more I'm hearing from people that are saying, well, there's a bunch of these machines, little netbooks that have Atom processors. They're 32-bit. And I'm hearing from people every time that I mention something who come to me and say, well, I got this machine running. Maybe it's not quite time to dump 32-bit. Could be that maybe they're jumping the gun. I really didn't have much of an opinion on this when this started to happen, when the 32-bit support started to go away. When Google Chrome dropped 32-bit support, I thought that's the end, man. We're not going to... Okay, it's going away now. Everybody's got to move to 64. But now I'm starting to wonder whether they're jumping the gun a little bit. So I'm sure that in the comments we'll get lots of input from you guys on that particular thing as well. But I wanted to tell you the story. And my brother's machine is up and running and happy. And it's doing what it's doing. So that's very cool indeed. And I guess that about wraps it up for this lovely video. I want to thank everybody for watching and hanging out. And before I go, I want to say that all of the drama that is going on in the YouTube/Linux community right now, it really has had it's really been weird to watch. And you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to jump in. If you know what I'm talking about, great. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, whatever. A lot of people have weighed in and commented now, and it has caused quite the drama fest. Just want to let you guys know that we're still here. We're still doing our thing. Just sitting back and watching the whole thing happen, and wish everybody the best of luck. But it certainly has been fun to watch, hasn't it? Your comments and suggestions are always welcome. You can hit me in the comments section here on YouTube. Probably the best way to get a hold of me is go to EzeeLinux.com and send me a message through the Contact Us page. Also, check out EzeeLinux on Facebook. It's quite a growing community there. And check out FreedomPenguin.com for lots of cool content about Linux. And we will do this again soon.